Hello guys, welcome to another video. So in this one, I want to talk about components. What is a component and how do we use it? Why do we need it? And before we do that, let me show you how you can navigate in 3D space in Unity. Because I'm going to do that quite a lot and I want you to be familiar with the buttons I press to see things in the scene. Okay, so I'm going to create a 3D cube here. Now we have a cube. And you already know that we can focus on the cube by pressing on the object twice. You can also zoom out or zoom in with your wheel on the mouse. You can just select it and then press F and you're going to be focused on the object. You'll always see the hotkey on the screen if I press it, so don't worry about it. You don't need to memorize it now. Now, the next thing I do a lot is I'm holding Alt key on the keyboard, and while you're holding Alt, you can rotate around the object like that. You just need to hold the Alt key and use your left mouse button to rotate around the object. Okay, and also you can use you can hold the wheel button to move around the scene like that. And you don't need to focus on the object. You can also rotate like that just with the empty space. So that's what I do most of the time. I just move around, rotate a little bit with the Alt. I can focus on the object, rotate around, zoom out, and like that. You don't really need anything else here. There are lots of buttons. If you want, you can go to Edit, Shortcuts, and you can check all of them. But that is completely optional because we're going to use hotkeys a lot and there is no doubt you will memorize them with the time. Now let's talk about components in Unity. I want to make a 3D sphere and I want to place it above the cube like that. Yeah, something like this will do. Now let's talk about it. You can see in the inspector we have transform component, mesh filter component, mesh renderer component, and sphere collider. And each component does different thing. And basically, adding component is like adding a property to the game object. It's like giving it certain behaviors or parameters, and it all depends on what you need. You can use Unity's built-in components or you can create a custom components. And we're gonna do that later on. As of now, let's just take the components we have as example and talk about them a little bit. And later on in the future, when I'm gonna use new component, I'm gonna explain what it does. So we have a transform, and this one is responsible for the object being in 3D space of the game world. Mesh filter is responsible for giving a visual shape to the object. As you can see, this one has a sphere, cube over here has a cube, and if you create some kind of 3D model, it's going to have a custom mesh that you could create in another software like Blender. And we're going to have things like that later on in the course. All right, so there is also a mesh renderer, and this one is responsible for having material on the game object. Also, it dictates how object will react to lights in the scene, light probes, and there are some additional settings as well. But you don't need to worry about them right now. And there is another component. It is a sphere collider. And this one is responsible for giving physical shape to the game object. Unity needs to know what is the physical shape, what is a collider of the game object, so it can calculate the collision between different objects. We can add another component here. Let's type rigid body and let's choose rigid body. And now if I go to play mode, we can see that ball is going to fall on the cube, but cube is not falling. Maybe let's go here to the game window and do play unfocused so we don't move out of the scene window. Okay, so again, I'm gonna click play and we can see ball is falling on the cube, but cube is not falling. And difference between these two objects is very simple. We can see that sphere has a rigid body and cube does not have a rigid body. If I add a rigid body here, then cube is going to fall as well. And they fall in together. Now let's go out of a play mode and we can see cube does not have a rigid body because I did that in the play mode And if you do anything in a play mode, changes will not be saved when you exit the play mode. Okay, now let's try something else. What if we go to the box collider of the cube and disable this component, or maybe even delete it like that? Let's do remove component. Now this object has visuals and it has position, but it does not have a collider, and Unity does know what is the shape of the object. If there is no shape, it's just going to ignore any collision for this game object because it does not have any collider on it. And if we go to play mode, we can see how sphere is just falling through. So that's how you manipulate different game objects. That's how you give or remove different properties and different behaviors from the objects. Let's bring back the box collider. And let's go to sphere over here. So you can not only add and remove components, but also you can do different things to the components itself. You can adjust the behavior, like changing mass, drag, or anything else on the rigid body component. I'm not gonna go too deep into rigid body right now, just wanna show you something cool. What could we do here? I think we could go to cube, we could give it a rigid body, and we can just freeze X and Z position, and maybe Y position as well, but let's not freeze the rotation. And let's take the sphere and move it a bit on the corner of the cube. I'm gonna switch orientation over here just for a while. Place it like so, switch back, and now we go to play mode and let's see what is happening. They both have a rigid body and they can collide, but this cube has frozen position on the rigid body, so it cannot move, it can only rotate. And because of that, ball just hit the cube, it fell down, and cube is just rotating like that. So that's one of the ways of manipulating components to get desired behavior. All right, we're gonna use lots of them, we're gonna use lots of different components for different purposes, so there is no doubt you'll learn a lot about them. Lastly, I want to say that script is a component as well. And if you want, you can attach this component to the game object just like that. And that's how you're creating a custom component. If you want some custom specific behavior from the game object, you create a script, you write some code, and it will do whatever you want. And we're going to talk about scripting in the next video. That's what I want to do. So as of now, let's just delete these two. We learned a bit about components and it's fine. And let's go to the next video.